Hello, and welcome to an Unconventional Guide to Success, where we are exploring concepts and discussing real life examples showing that the path isn't linear and the journey to success is self defined. My name is Linda Misegadis,
And I'm Scott Montgomery.
and we will be your guides. So, Scott, one of the things that I think is really important is, and you talk about this in your book, the really kind of establishing a mindset, and you talk about going from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, and then also self care. So, in
Yeah.
all of this, we've been talking about, drive, and we've talked about, goal setting and habits and routines, and it's like I'm
Yes.
tired now, so I'm like, oh my gosh,
Exhausted.
I'm just like I don't even know where to begin, and so. Can we talk a little bit about why it's so important in all of this? Because I think that we probably all learned this lesson during COVID for sure, is that we live in a society, especially in the US, that is so focused and driven and go, 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 that we don't take time to develop that mindset. And we certainly don't take nearly enough time for self-care. So talk about why that's important to you.
Yeah. So for me, self-care is really important because, again, we've talked a little bit in habits around that ADD thing that I
Yeah.
have that sort of creates an additional static towards my drive, goals, and habits. That
Yeah.
if I can mitigate that, my mindful approach to my habits and goals, objectives, and desires for success can be more focused. So there's one element of that.
Yeah.
I'm also very much a visionary leader. And as a visionary leader, I tend to love to live above the forest. I
Yeah.
don't really like to get in and smell the flowers.
Sure.
And I find my best result is when I do take a minute to go down in and smell the flowers and walk around the paths of the forest,
Yeah.
than just be up in the clouds trying to orchestrate what gets planted in said forest.
That makes
Right.
sense. Yep.
And I find that if I'm going to be working in peak performance and I'm going to calm my crazy thought process and I'm going to pull out of just being a visionary, the best way for me to do that is to be focused on mindfulness. The
Yeah.
best way for me to approach mindfulness, I have found, is through working out. It's through massages. It's through triathlons, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I like a
Yeah.
component of drive for me,
Yep.
but I also think it creates an element of time to process,
Yeah.
time to step back, time to feel good in my own skin. And these things all matter if I'm going to drive success through
Yeah.
the other things that we've spent a lot of time talking about. And
Yeah.
and I know massages can be expensive, triathlon equipment can be expensive. My thought process here is that people take a minute to do things that bring down the energy and that drive you refer to.
Right.
And being in a learner mindset is something that Carol Dweck wrote about in her growth mindset book. Because, and I was introduced to that because they're teaching it to my kids in elementary school.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
There's something very satiating and calming by being in a learning mindset than in a reactionary one position sort of mindset. And for me to shift that logic, I do those things I just talked about.
Yeah. No,
They
that
help me
makes a lot
work,
of sense.
and they help me work at peak performance.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Back
and
to the
everything
habits.
comes back. Yeah. Everything
Yeah.
comes back to the habits, goals, patterns. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that, so it's taken me a very, very long time to get there. And, as we talked about in our prior podcasts a little bit, I kind of exposed myself in that, the idea of how my brain operates. And part of the reason why my brain operates that way is because, of having a component of mania, manic in my personality. So, I do definitely suffer from that. And I think, with a focus today on destigmatizing mental health. And so
Yeah.
for someone like myself who struggled through having bipolar disorder my whole life and trying to figure that out, where it really did come back to is this self-care concept, right? And so
Mhm.
being able to ground myself in things like meditation. And
Mhm.
so I just do short meditations every morning. And it's part of my routine. And I don't do them the right way. I don't sit down in a quiet room and do them the way you're supposed to. But it works for me because I listen to the message and then I focus on that. And that's how I start my day. And I think, too, establishing some things. I wrapped my entire how I defined myself and how I defined
Mhm.
success around my job, right? Everything I
Mm.
did in life was how successful was I at my job?
Mhm.
And it wasn't
Mhm.
even necessarily did my family think I was successful. It was did all these strangers who meant absolutely nothing in my life did they think I was
Mhm.
successful? So did my boss think I was doing a good job or did my coworkers think I was amazing? Those were things that I got very wrapped up around instead of focusing on the people that were in my life and myself and realizing that what was most important is what did I think of myself
Mhm.
and how was I viewing my own success and how was I dealing with my own mental health components
Mhm.
in a better way. And I think, going through, we talked about it a little bit in our first podcast. And I mentioned that I went through a lot of loss, I felt like literally I lost everyone in my life. There was a lot of death. And it really kind of made me take a step back and recognize how important self-care was.
Mhm.
And I think that going through and like I said, COVID, I think was an eye opener for a lot of people, but particularly in a country like the US, where we wrap so much around just this constant need to work, right? It's
Yeah.
everything is work, 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 work. Yeah, got to give the Europeans a lot of credit in the way that they do holidays. It's like, and when they are on holiday, they are on holiday. We're a global company. And so I know when people are out, don't bother calling them because they aren't answering the phone. And so, and I actually, at first, I used to be very judgmental and critical of that way of thinking. And now I
Yeah.
am starting to, I'm not there yet, but I'm starting to get better about recognizing that I actually perform at a higher peak performance
Yeah.
when I actually take the time to step away and go play golf
Yes.
with my son and my husband, or,
Good.
go, I love walking my dogs.
Mhm.
That's an important thing to me, even though they're crazy nuts when we're on our walk. It's actually very relaxing to me, oddly enough. And so, it's finding those things, but I think, you talk a little bit about, the positive and the negative around kind of developing those growth and fixed mindsets in the book. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that and kind of what you meant when you were describing that whole kind of positive and negative approach.
Yeah, I think for me, well, and the growth mindset just continues for me as a continual learner, right? So I'm in the
Yeah.
process of just constantly evolving and being more aware of areas to improve, and go with the flow and not drive as hard necessarily.
Yeah.
And I will go back to saying you had mentioned that meditation works for you and that you don't necessarily do it right. And
Yeah.
I would argue that you do it at all makes it right. And
Sure. Yeah.
and the way I have learned meditation has been to whatever grounds you and in the moment. And yeah, sure, you got to create some quiet and some stability in the environment, but and focus on your breath and all these other things are great tips. But I think it's
Yeah.
really important that people recognize there's no right or wrong way for self care, right? Or
Yeah.
mindset. Finding your mindfulness just allows you to work at peak performance.
Yeah.
And again, honor all the things that we've been talking about in our podcast. But, we're wired to be in the negative. And I know I find that, like, for example, if I'm out for a run, my mind is saying stop, but my heart rate's improving and my muscles are getting
Yeah.
stronger. So, like,
Yeah.
how you overcome that is a perfect example of how you would overcome finding your own success too, right?
Hmm.
So that mindfulness is created through the self-care aspect of running.
Yeah.
And then therefore it perpetuates a better cardiovascular, better breathing, stronger muscles, more awareness, and out of that comes peak performance.
Yeah. I like
You
that.
can take a minute to breathe. That'll also make your peak performance less wear and tear on you,
Yes. Yeah. No, that's
right?
very true. And breathing is something that I have really embraced. It's something I didn't even realize that I did this. My husband pointed it out one time. He was watching me do a workout, and he's like, "Linda, no wonder why you're getting migraines. You don't breathe." And it's because I was concentrating so hard on the activity that I had forgotten to just breathe. And so that is a practice that I have now incorporated into my daily life. Is that when I'm getting escalated or
Mhm.
frustrated, I stop and I just breathe. I take that deep breath and just kind of let it go. And I find that in doing just a simple act of breathing, it actually calms my soul, and I can deal with whatever situation is in front of me. And you said in one of our previous podcasts, and I loved the way that you said this, is that we were talking about emails and intent and how you can read the wrong thing.
Yeah, I was
And
thinking the
you
same thing.
said, yeah, you said, I read every email with the intent that it's good intention, right? That
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not negative.
Not ill-intended.
Yeah, not ill-intended. And I thought, I'm going to actually take that little tidbit into my own world as well, because it is so easy to just what you said. We are wired towards the negative. We always approach things that way.
Fight or
And we
flight.
assume that people, we assume that that's bad or that they're ill-intended. And I loved it when you said that, because I thought, gosh, I'm going to incorporate that as well. When I read an email going forward that I think is negative, I'm going to flip that and say, I bet that their intention here was not negative at all. And then I'm misreading the tone of the email. And then I'm not upset, because that's what ends up happening is the person who sent it to you is probably not upset. Now you're all frustrated and that now your heart rate is up and you got all of this going on.
Right.
And it's just so unnecessary. And it's so unhealthy for what we were talking about with creating this mindset and self-care and getting to that positive
Well,
place.
I've been on another, I don't mean to cut, I want to expand on that a minute, because I've been on another podcast where I actually got feedback from viewers that they really appreciated this. This carries over what you're talking about, and I want to expand on it a little bit. It carries over into the real world, and it also perpetuates the pay it forward perspective.
Yeah.
So imagine driving down the road and someone cuts you off, and you assume they cut you off, and you come in and rear end them, and you bump them off the road, and they're dead, and you're going to jail for the next 5 years because of an intention.
Right.
And then you find out it was some 80-year-old lady who had a depth perception issue, or you were in their blind spot, forgot her turn signal and moved over slowly, and you backed off.
Yeah.
And then you find them in line with you at the grocery store that you're both driving to, and they pay for your groceries because they're doing a pay it forward kindness act that day.
Right.
Think about if you really, really work on that, taking a perspective of that people are not ill-intended. 99% of the time, you're not carrying static, and your experience and interactions will be positive, perpetuating peak performance.
Right.
The best way to do that is to not be tired, be watered and fed, be aware of your environment, take care of yourself physically, keep those endorphins up, and go get your nails done and take your dog for a walk.
Yeah.
It matters. Because it'll be how you impact yourself in your life. It will pay back to you threefold. I guarantee it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of An Unconventional Guide to Success. In each episode, Scott and I will share experiences and relationships that have shaped us. In our next episode, we will discuss self-care. Instead of worrying about what you cannot control, shift your energy to what you can create. Roy T. Bennett. An Unconventional Guide to Success is an inspirational, motivated series hosted by Scott Montgomery and Linda Misegadis. Recorded on Riverside.fm. Music, editing, and production by Logan Misegadis. Check out Scott Montgomery's new book, How Did You Get Here, and all the helpful related materials at www.howdidyougетhere.com. Thank you for joining us on our journey. If you would like to reach out to us, our contact information is in the show notes. At the end of each episode, we would like to leave you with a few questions offered to guide you in your personal exploration of how relationships and experiences are building your success. Take time to reflect and write about what arises. What about your current mindset moves you forward? Where does your mind feel most at ease? How could mindfulness practices help you?